I want to tell you about one afternoon. A mother, I'll call her Sarah, was sitting on the couch after a long day. Not long in the dramatic sense. Just that particular kind of exhaustion that builds up quietly for nursing sessions. No real lunch, and a pile of dishes in the sink staring at her like a silent accusation. She'd just put the baby down 10 minutes ago. The baby was asleep. She exhaled that specific sigh that only parents of newborns truly understand and picked up her phone. 3 minutes later. A sound, then crying. Then her daughter woke up and looked around with the panicked expression of someone who doesn't know where they are. Sarah put the phone down, walked into the room, and picked her up. The crying stopped immediately, not gradually, not after a few minutes of soothing. Immediately, like someone had flipped a switch. Then the baby started climbing. Not lying in her arms, climbing. Up onto her chest. Pressing her face into Sarah's neck. Both tiny hands gripping her shoulders with the full force of a 6-month-old, channeling everything she had into one single purpose. Getting as close as possible. Sarah looked at her daughter. Still tired. Still exhausted. But something about the way the baby lay against her, that urgency, that almost desperate need made her stop and wonder, what is she actually trying to tell me? That's the question I want to answer today. Not in a vague, babies need love kind of way, that's true, but it barely scratches the surface. I mean the real answer. From neuroscience, from developmental psychology, from decades of research into what is actually happening inside that tiny brain. And I promise you, by the time we're done, you will never see that moment the same way again. Part 1. Let's challenge something you think you already know. I want to start with one word, clingy. How many times have you heard that word? She's so clingy. Why does he always have to be on you? You'll spoil them if you keep holding them. Maybe from a grandparent. Maybe from a neighbor. Maybe from someone online who said it with total confidence. The word clingy carries a very specific judgment. It implies the baby is doing something wrong. That they're being demanding. Manipulative, even. That if you keep responding, you're making the problem worse. And if you're the caregiver, that word puts you in an impossible position. You're exhausted. You need a break. But every time you put the baby down and they cry, you don't just hear crying. You hear judgment. Am I spoiling them? Am I creating a problem here? I want to say this directly. Clingy is one of the most damaging words we've applied to infant behavior. Not because it's cruel, but because it takes a complex, sophisticated biological behavior and slaps a moral label on it. And when you label something wrong, you respond to it wrong. So let's start over. Let's set that word aside. And let's look at what's actually happening. Part 2. The baby brain in the first year and why you are the most important thing in it. To understand why your baby climbs on you, you need to understand one fundamental truth about the human brain that rarely gets said out loud. Human beings are the only species on Earth born with an unfinished brain. A foal can stand and run within hours of birth. An elephant calf can walk on its first day. But a human baby, after 9 full months in the womb, still can't do anything independently. Can't roll over. Can't hold their head up. Can't regulate their own body temperature. Why? Because the human brain is too large, too complex to finish developing inside the womb. If it waited until it was ready, the baby couldn't be born at all. So, evolution made a compromise. Come out earlier and finish developing on the outside. The result is that a newborn baby is essentially still in a 4th trimester. Their brain is in the middle of massive construction, and throughout that process, they need an external support system to stand in for everything the brain can't yet do on its own. That external support system is you. When a baby is stressed, hungry, cold, overstimulated, something feels wrong. their body releases cortisol, the stress hormone. In adults, when cortisol rises, the prefrontal cortex activates and helps us process, calm down, find a solution. That's self-regulation, but in a newborn, the prefrontal cortex isn't developed enough to do that yet. The baby can't tell itself it's okay. It's just a loud noise. Can't take a deep breath and settle. Those tools don't exist yet. So when cortisol rises, and nothing brings it down, it keeps rising. Heart rate accelerates. Breathing becomes erratic. The baby's body enters a state of physiological alarm that they have absolutely no way of escaping on their own. Unless you're there. A study published in Biological Psychiatry measured exactly what happens to a baby's cortisol when they have consistent physical contact with their caregiver. Compared to when they don't, the results weren't the baby seems a little calmer. The results showed cortisol levels significantly lower, enough that researchers described it as one of the most important biological interventions in the newborn period. When your baby climbs onto you and presses their body against yours, your heartbeat slows theirs. Your steady breathing pulls their breathing into rhythm. Your stable body temperature regulates theirs. Your calm nervous system, quite literally, becomes the operating nervous system for your baby. Harvard's Center on the Developing Child calls this co-regulation, and they don't mean it as a metaphor. This is measured, documented, photographed biology. Your baby isn't being clingy. They are borrowing your nervous system because they don't have a fully functioning one of their own yet. Imagine you're in an extremely stressful situation. Heart pounding, mind spinning, hands shaking, and you have absolutely no ability to calm yourself down, not because you're weak, but because the part of your brain that handles calming doesn't exist yet. Then someone places their hand on your shoulder, sits down beside you, breathes slowly and steadily, and just ... stays, and your body starts to settle. That is what your baby experiences every single time they climb on you. Every time. Without exception. Part 3. The sound your baby knew before they knew anything else. Place your hand on the left side of your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Steady, continuous, never stopping. Now, think about this. For 9 months inside the womb, that was the clearest sound your baby ever heard. Not your voice. Your voice came through filtered by amniotic fluid in the wall of your belly, muffled and distorted. But your heartbeat transmitted directly through bone, through fluid, through everything, was clear, strong, constant. Every sleep your baby had in the womb happened against that rhythm. Every moment they moved, rolled, kicked, the heartbeat was always there underneath. For 9 months, that rhythm organized the entire experience of their existence. Then birth happened, and suddenly silence. No more heartbeat. The world was vast, bright, loud, cooler, and missing the one steady rhythm that had always been there. There's a medical practice called kangaroo care, which began in the 1970s in Colombia. When hospitals didn't have enough incubators for premature babies, a doctor named Edgar Ray Sanabria proposed something that sounded almost too simple. Place the baby directly on the mother's bare chest, skin to skin, for hours every day. The results stunned the medical world. Survival rates for premature infants jumped dramatically. Not slightly dramatically. Babies gained weight faster, slept more deeply, showed stronger brain development, more stable immune systems. Why, researchers initially thought it was the warmth. Then they thought it was the mother's scent. Then easier access to breast milk. All of those factors played a role. But when they isolated each variable, one thing stood out above everything else. The heartbeat. When the baby lies on the mother's chest, their ear is pressed against exactly the right position to hear the heartbeat clearly, and they recognize it immediately. Not consciously, but at a level far deeper neurologically. biologically a level that was programmed over 9 months. And when they recognize it, the brain sends a signal. Safe. Familiar. Home. This explains something that many parents notice but can't explain. Why a baby crying intensely will stop immediately when placed against your chest, not after a few minutes of soothing, but within the very first second. Not because they're being manipulated, not because they got what they wanted, but because that heartbeat that I'm home signal triggers an immediate calming response at the neurological level. You're not just this baby's mother or father. You are your baby's map of the safest place in the world, and that map was drawn before they knew what the world was. Part 4. What nobody tells you about 8 months old. Somewhere around 8, 9, 10 months, many babies suddenly become much more clingy. Not a little more, a lot more. Crying the moment you leave their line of sight. Panicking when you walk to the bathroom. Climbing onto you with an urgency that feels almost desperate. And this often happens at exactly the same time people around you start saying, "They're getting older now. You need to teach them to be more independent." I want to explain why that timing is not a coincidence, and why that advice, however well-meaning, is completely misreading what's actually happening. There's a concept in developmental psychology called object permanence. Simply put, it's the ability to understand that something still exists, even when you can't see it. You put your phone in your pocket, you know it's still there. You close the refrigerator door, you know the food inside didn't disappear. This seems so obvious, it's almost funny. But to the brain of a 6-month-old baby, this is not obvious at all. Before around 8 months, when you leave the room, your baby doesn't think mom's in the kitchen. That concept doesn't exist for them yet. To your baby's brain at this stage, when you disappear from sight, you simply cease to exist. Not go somewhere else. Cease to exist. Stop and really feel that for a second. Imagine you're sitting in a room. The most important person in your life is there with you. Then they stand up and ... vanish. Not walk into another room. Completely vanish. Gone from your reality entirely. Then they reappear. Then vanish again. Then reappear. Over and over, every single day, dozens of times. How would you feel? Could you sit there, calm and settled? That is the world your baby is living in. And here's the fascinating part. This is why the 8 to 12-month phase feels so intense for so many parents. Not because the baby is regressing, but because they are progressing. At exactly this stage, the brain begins building the concept of object permanence. Your baby is learning that you still exist when they can't see you. But while they're learning, while they're constructing that cognitive model, they're not sure yet. And in that uncertainty, they need constant proof that you're still there. That proof is physical contact. When your baby climbs on you and presses against you, they're checking. You're real. You're still here. The world hasn't fallen apart. Each time they're confirmed, the cognitive model in their brain gets reinforced a little more. And when that model is solid enough, when they genuinely understand that you exist, even when they can't see you, the clinginess naturally fades. Not because they were taught to be independent, but because their brain completed the developmental phase it needed to complete. What we call clingy is actually a developmental milestone, the sign of a brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Learning exactly what it needs to learn, on exactly the right timeline. Part 5. When your baby climbs on you and then looks at your face, what are they actually asking? There's a very specific moment I want you to watch for from now on. The next time your baby climbs on you, pay attention to what they do immediately after. Especially from around 6 months onward. There's a good chance they'll look up at your face. Not a quick glance. A steady, searching, reading kind of look. They're looking for something specific. Developmental psychologists call this behavior social referencing. And it's one of the most fascinating findings in all of infant research. From around 8 months, a baby's brain starts doing something remarkably sophisticated. Before responding to a new or ambiguous situation, the baby looks at their caregiver's face for information, not for comfort, not for reassurance, for information. They're asking, is this dangerous? Should I be scared? What is the state of the world right now? And your face, in a fraction of a second, answers that question. A study at the University of California tested this in a very specific way. They placed babies at the edge of a device called the visual cliff, a sheet of clear glass that looked like a steep drop but was completely safe. On the other side, the baby's mother stood and called them to crawl across. The baby would crawl to the edge, look down, then look up at mom's face, look down again, look back at mom. When mothers were asked to show fear, eyebrows raised, mouth open, not a single baby crawled across. Even though the surface was completely safe, when mothers were asked to show calm and encouragement, a small smile, an easy nod, a warm voice, most of the babies crawled across. Even though it still looked like a cliff, the mother's face determined the baby's action, not the objective reality of the situation. It means when your baby climbs on you and looks at your face, they're asking, how is the world today? And your face answers that question, whether you're aware of it or not. When you look down at them with warmth, even when you're tired, even when this is the 5th time today, their nervous system receives the signal, okay, everything is okay, I can relax. When you look down with tension, distraction, or impatience, and this is completely normal, completely understandable, their nervous system receives a different signal. Something's not right. I need to stay alert. I'm not saying this to create pressure. I'm not saying you have to be happy and glowing every single time your baby looks at you. That's not realistic and it's not necessary. What I'm saying is this. When your baby climbs on you and looks at your face, that moment is not random. That's your baby gathering real information about their world, and your face is the most trusted source of information they have. Simply knowing that, simply understanding that they're asking a genuine question already changes the way you show up in that moment. Part 6. What you're building that you can't see yet. I want to tell you about a study. Not one that ran for a few weeks or a few months, one that ran for over 30 years. The Minnesota Longitudinal Study of Risk and Adaptation, begun in the 1970s, followed hundreds of children from birth through their 30s. Researchers observed everything: how parents interacted with their babies, how the children developed, then tracked those same people through adolescence, into adulthood, and beyond. They wanted to know, do experiences in the first year of life actually create lasting differences? Or are we overestimating how much those early months matter? The answer they found after 30 years, after thousands of data points, was so clear that even the researchers themselves were surprised. Yes, the differences are real, and they last. People classified as having secure attachment in infancy, meaning they had a caregiver who consistently, warmly responded to their needs, showed as adults better emotional regulation. When they hit hard times, they recovered faster. When stressed, they had more tools to work with, more satisfying relationships, not because they were luckier in love, but because they had an internal template for what a healthy relationship looks like. Better mental health outcomes, significantly lower rates of depression, anxiety, and personality disorders, higher academic and professional achievement, not because of higher IQ, but because of stronger resilience, better ability to handle failure, and greater capacity for collaboration. And the thing that created those differences wasn't a good school. It wasn't educational toys. It wasn't a perfect diet. It was someone consistently showing up when they reached out. Every time your baby climbs onto you and you let them stay, you are sending a message into their developing brain. The message is, when you reach out, someone is here. When you need something, someone comes. This world responds to your needs. That message, repeated thousands of times in the early months, becomes the template your baby uses to understand every relationship they'll ever have. The template that says, I can reach out. Other people are trustworthy. I'm not alone in this. That's not the first chapter of a book. It's the foundation of the whole building. Part 7. But you're also a human being, and that matters just as much. I need to say something directly, because I don't want everything I've said so far to create a new kind of pressure. If you've read this far and you're thinking, oh no, every time I want to put the baby down, I'm damaging their brain, stop right there. That is not what I'm saying. There's an important concept in developmental psychology that doesn't get talked about enough. It's called good enough parenting, a term introduced by British psychologist Donald Winnicott back in the 1950s. And it's just as relevant today. Winnicott argued that the goal of parenting isn't perfection. It's being good enough. And good enough, as defined by the research, doesn't mean responding to every cry within 30 seconds. Doesn't mean never being stressed. Doesn't mean being 100% present every waking moment. Good enough means the overall pattern. When your baby needs you, you tend to show up. When you're not there, you come back. And that return, that consistency over time, is what builds secure attachment. A caregiver who is exhausted, who never gets a break, who has no time to themselves, cannot be a good regulator for their baby. Because in order to regulate your baby, you need to be regulated first. Which means, the 5 minutes you spend sitting alone, the meal you actually eat while it's still warm, the nap you take when the baby sleeps instead of pushing through the housework, the phone call with your best friend, the cup of coffee that doesn't go cold, those things aren't you neglecting your baby. Those things are you maintaining the system. Because a calm, rested, not completely depleted version of you is worth more to your baby than an always present, but running an empty version of you. So when you need to put the baby down, here is what the research says actually helps. Don't go silent when you do it. Talk to your baby. Nothing complicated. Just, I'm going to put you down here for a little bit, okay? I'm still right here. Then keep talking as you move so your voice creates a thread of sound that connects your baby to you even after the physical contact has ended. Your baby's brain can't see you and know you're still there, but it can hear you, and your voice is proof that you haven't disappeared. Studies on infant stress responses consistently show that what causes distress isn't the interruption of physical contact itself. It's sudden, silent interruption. A baby placed down with warm words, when the caregiver remains visible and audible, settles significantly faster than a baby placed down in silence. Your voice is the extension of your arms. When you can't hold them, talk to them. Part 8. What I want you to remember most. There's a question I want you to take with you after reading this. Not a technical question. Not a method question. A question about perspective. The question is, the next time your baby climbs on you, what do you see? Do you see a demanding baby? A clingy baby? A baby who needs to learn independence? Or do you see an unfinished nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do, seeking the one external regulator it knows? Do you see a baby invading your space? Or do you see a baby searching for the heartbeat they knew before they knew anything else in the world? Do you see an inconvenience? Or do you see a question, the question your baby asks you every single day, with their body instead of words? The question that only you can answer. Am I safe? Is the world okay? When I reach out, is there someone there? I want to tell you how Sarah's story ended. That evening, after the baby was finally asleep, she sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea. She was thinking about the afternoon, about the way her daughter had climbed up onto her chest, the way the crying had stopped instantly, the way those tiny hands had gripped her shoulders. And she thought, I never understood that before. She wasn't thinking about neuroscience, wasn't thinking about cortisol or heartbeats or social referencing. She was just sitting with this new understanding that when her baby climbed on her, she wasn't being demanding. She was needing. And needing is something completely different. She told me afterward, after that day, I was still just as tired. I still had moments where I desperately wanted 5 minutes to myself. But I looked at those moments differently. I didn't feel demanded from anymore. I felt needed. And those two things, even though they sound similar, feel completely different. Here is what I want you to know. In these early months, the months when your baby climbs on you, the sleepless nights, the days when you can't remember if you've eaten your baby is asking you a question. That question is never spoken out loud. It's never put into words. But it's asked through every reach, every cry, every time they climb on you with the urgency of someone searching for the most important thing in the world. The question is, am I worth reaching for? And every time you're there, even when you're tired, even if it's the 10th time today, even if you can only give them 5 minutes before you need to put them down, you are answering that question. That answer will stay with them long after they've forgotten everything else about these early days. It will be there when they're 5 years old and fall off their bike, looking up to see if anyone is coming. When they're 15 and fail at something for the first time, deciding whether to tell anyone. When they're 25 and fall in love for the first time, deciding whether to trust someone with who they really are. In all of those moments, there's a foundational question they'll answer based on what they learned right now. When I reach out, is there someone there? Make sure they know the answer. Make sure the answer is yes. Is there a moment with your baby that you didn't fully understand at the time, but looking back, it means something completely different now? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.